Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, for your thumbs up, and for your comments. Thank you for supporting this channel. There is a thing that is unique to Black Americans relative to our past. Many people whose ancestors came through a slave system are embarrassed by it, and they try to hide it. Sometimes they do it by trying to erase the effects of it by marrying out into other races of people. And certainly there is some of that in our race. But most of us don't do that, and certainly not to erase who we are. So we actually take pride in the fact not that our ancestors were enslaved, but that they endured it and they survived it. And now we're saying, run me my money. We need our reparations. And there's something else unique about Black Americans. We go back to the scene of the crime. Black Americans will go back to those plantation homes. Some don't, but some do. I do. I go back to those old plantation homes because I want to know what the narrative is. And at the end of the day, they'll give you all this talk about the people that owned that house and who owned those enslaved people, but the narrative always turns to the enslaved people because they are the story. It's not the white people, it's not the house, it's the enslaved people. They are the story. So today I'm talking about the old plantation home and why we go back. This is an article from Smithsonian Magazine at Radcliffe Plantation in South Carolina, where their ancestors were enslaved. Brianna Hanley had a powerful, inspired idea to document her 2021 graduation from dental school. She donned her Alpha Kappa Alpha colors and academic regalia, then strolled confidently toward the camera. Before her was the ground that her ancestors cared for generations ago. Behind her stood the cabin where her great-great-great-great-grandparents, Lucy and Anthony Henley, lived while enslaved at Radcliffe Plantation in South Carolina. Asked why she chose this setting, Brianna noted the sense of immediate attachment and belonging she felt there. Captioning a photograph of herself on Instagram, she wrote, "I stand tall on the soil of my ancestors. I stand directly where the Henley family legacy began, out of sacrifice and perseverance." This March, Henley returned to Radcliffe to claim that legacy alongside 3 generations of her family. At the historic site's Descendants Day, the Henleys collectively continued a tradition that extends back to 1857, when their ancestors were forced onto a new plantation by their enslaver, James Henry Hammond. Despite Hammond's brutal enslaving tactics, the modern-day Henleys feel connected to this place. It is their ancestral home, their family legacy, but it wasn't supposed to be. Some historians and activists have called for plantations like Radcliffe to be renamed slave or forced labor camps. Others have asked whether these physical remnants of slavery should be demolished like Confederate monuments. I don't think they should be demolished at all. I think they should stay just where they are, not in government buildings, but on these plantations, because once you tear them down, they'll just lie and say it never happened. So I'm all for preserving these sites. Plantation tours that downplay the brutal violence of slavery distort historical truth. But those who see plantations solely as sites of exploitation can't explain why the Henleys keep coming back to Radcliffe. The usefulness and power of these places rests in their ability to tell multiple stories at once: white supremacy and Black resistance, loss and hope, slavery and freedom. A plantation like Radcliffe has the potential to do much more than what Hammond originally designed it to do. See, the white people see that as enslavement, those plantations. Black people see that as endurance and survival. There are a lot of black people who come to the South to this day whose families moved away from the South and went to places up north, out west, and they come back and they want to go to the plantation home. See, we don't see it as, we see it as survival. And it is kind of hard to explain because the reality is if they could endure it, surely you can go there and look at it and say they endured this, they survived. Now, we've been very patient, but cut the check. So the article goes on to talk about this man named James Henry Hammond and what a racist he was, and that he believed that slavery was inevitable and truly believed that the enslaved people were going to be a permanent working class free labor force in the United States. And they all believed that, and they hoped that, because that's the only way they could survive. He also believed, as well as others, that the more brutal and violent they were to the enslaved people, the better the enslaved people would be, not realizing that all he was doing was building resentment and resistance within those enslaved people. Even as the nation devolved into civil war, Hammond's thoughts turned to his descendants' permanent presence at his new property. My only earthly ambition and desire is to secure Red Cliff as a family residence for my children. See, he's thinking about his descendants way back then. He was trying to secure their future. And this is what he said in 1861. To state the obvious, he was referring solely to his white children. Hammond fathered at least 2 children by 2 enslaved women, a mother and daughter, named Sally and Louisa Johnson. He justified this sexual violence and countless other acts of brutality with lofty references to antiquity, including his position as head of that family. In other words, getting children by the enslaved people so his white children would have continuous slaves, okay? Ooh, a low life, really, just a low life. So as depressive as what these plantation homes represent, they were the homes of the enslaved people. The Henleys and other formerly enslaved residents of Red Cliff continued to live there for decades after emancipation. Sally, one of the enslaved women that he had children by, lived in a cabin just a short walk from her daughter and grandchildren, though neither she nor Louisa owned their homes. I don't even know why they said that. Of course they didn't own their home. They worked the land as tenant farmers, providing labor in turn for a house, water, and food. So to answer the question of why descendants of enslaved people go back to those plantations, you go back for the memories. You go back to feel connected to them and their struggle. And you go back triumphantly to say, look, great, 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 great grandma, we made it. We made it. And then to the descendants of the enslavers, we say, cut the check. I want to end by saying that these plantation homes are as popular as ever. They are still making money. They are doing these chores. And even though a lot of black people may not go to those plantations, white people flock to those plantations. They want to hear the romance of the plantation, a romance for them, but a nightmare for us. So they are upgrading and putting those slave huts out there and doing the most to try to get visitors. Those houses, they are called historic house museums. They are on the National Register, which means the government gives them money to keep those plantation houses up. In addition, they charge big money to tour those plantations. It is not cheap. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon, and I don't think they should, because if you tear all those plantation houses down, there will be those who will come back and try to rewrite history and say they never existed in the first place. So I think they should remain. But that's what I think. Let me know what you think. Thank you for listening and have a great evening.